All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for coming out and for stipending the time to have some intentional dialogue. Thank you, everybody at home and at work and on the beach, wherever you are streaming, tuning in for this exciting conversation. My name is Jay Hood. Most family and friends know me as Jay Hood. Alternatively, my government name is Jaron Clark, so I go by Jay Clark. And got some remarkable people joining me on stage today. Another gentleman, Wil Hambright, he'll be here shortly, so you'll see him scurry across the stage and get to a seating arrangement. To start, I have a video it's going to be a young lady by the name of Kimberly Jones. Many of you may have already seen it, and it's a reference of why can't we win? But prior to that video starting, another video later in the show will be a gentleman by the name of Paul Rucker. But before that, I'd like to introduce my guests. Again, some phenomenal people working in some remarkable industries, doing some remarkable things to create some intergenerational change and some systemic change to counteract some of the things that have plagued our Black communities. You won't hear me reference the impoverished communities or the underprivileged communities or the disenfranchised communities. You'll hear me say Black. So again, I want to thank you all for your time. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Edgar Antillo as well as Stacey Putka. And I'd like for them to just reference a little bit about who they are, what they do, and why they're here. And then, as mentioned, we'll move into the video by Kimberly Jones. So, Edgar?
Hello, my name is Edgar Antillo. I am the owner of Guns for Everyone. Guns for Everyone is, I brag about this all the time, and I get shit for it all the time, but I own the largest handgun training company in the state of Colorado. We really started off, I'll give you the second stage of Guns for Everyone. We'll skip the first stage. But it was more of an activism, and it's just what the name is we believe everybody should have that ability, whether they decide to go for it or not, that's on them, but everybody should have the ability to defend themselves and has the right to self-preservation from any enemy. On top of that, I am a filmmaker. I've made films, currently working on my second documentary about mental health and guns. My first documentary was about gun violence, just in general, more so as it pertains to neighborhoods where I grew up. I grew up here in Denver on the west side, on the corner of King and Colfax with back in the 90s when gangs were really about. So it focuses more on that gun violence, not what the media talks about, because kind of always forgotten in the hood. So it's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much. And Stacey?
I'm Stacey Putka. I'm the executive director of a local Colorado nonprofit called Defy Ventures Colorado. We do entrepreneurial education inside the Colorado prison system. And I'll tell you guys so much more about it later, but I'm really excited to talk with you about what we do and how it's related to systemic racism and the issues that are at the forefront of our nation's conversation right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, I want to reiterate my appreciation for friends and family that have come out to join us here physically and in person. I want to reiterate my appreciation for all of those of you tuning in at home. We're going to move into that video that I referenced by a young lady by the name of Kimberly Jones referencing Black America and the truth and some depths and some harsh realities just associated with Black America. Feel free to feel uncomfortable. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to hate me. And I'm okay with that because I'm not an elected official, nor do I aspire to be one, so I don't really give a damn. And with that said, Mr. Fitz, can we cue up the first video, please? For all of you at home, you'll be able to hear it and see it. For all of us here, I believe we'll be able to hear it. Some pretty powerful messaging in that. And to bring it back to the surface, again, my name is Jay Clark. Friends and family know me as Jay Hood. And I'm privileged to be here, so I want to thank Don. I want to thank the team at Dazzle for having me. And in our private conversations, Don and I kind of discussed what my topic of conversation would be. So to lay it out so everybody's clear on why I'm here, I want to talk about equity. I want to talk about equity. Equality means nothing to me, and having this song and dance and prancing around as though kente cloth scarves and kneeling and marching with the people means anything. It doesn't mean anything to me. It may mean something to a lot of people. It means absolutely nothing to me because we're still bullshitting each other. Unless we're talking about money, unless we're talking about fiscal resources, unless we're talking about the depth associated with what happened in Tulsa and what was lost after Tulsa, unless we're talking about the depths of what has occurred across a multitude of different industries where there are still no black people in positions of power, in positions of influence, in positions of authority, then we're not really having an honest conversation. And that's okay. And I think that's why Don called me. So with that said, I have one more specialist who's since joined us on the stage, Mr. Wil Hambright. And I'd love for you to just give a brief overview of who you are, your profession, what brought you out today, and then I'd like to ask the same of Stacey and Edgar, just a few questions. And so, Mr. Hambright, if you wouldn't mind who you are, what you do, why you're here, and then I'll queue up a few more questions for us.
First and foremost, I want to apologize for running late. I didn't realize 12 o'clock snuck up on me so fast when handling other kind of business. But at the end of the day, that's no excuse because we're supposed to be on time, you know. But with that said, my name is Wil Hambright. Jay, I just met him for the first time yesterday through another friend who referred me to that you all were having this panel. So when I first heard that he was doing this panel, I immediately pushed my schedule aside on things I had going on to be a part of it, because I do think this discussion is very, very important for us all. And I like the fact that we're now starting to open up to have this type dialogue to give the whole world a perception of our, as African American people, reality. That's one aspect. A little bit by myself. I was born and raised in the city of Detroit. I lived there all my life. I'm a retired Detroit police officer. I have 20 years, almost 20 years in law enforcement with the Detroit Police Department. So I have a very extensive law enforcement background. I've also worked in the jails, Oakland County Sheriff. I worked out here with Lyman Correctional Facility. So my background in law enforcement is very, very, very extensive. So what I can add to you all that may have some questions or concerns about the mindset of a police officer, the psychology of what happened. Because the problem is right now, the way I see it from a community standpoint, the community and the public does not really, unless you've been in law enforcement or some form of law enforcement in some, whether you're a lawyer, whatever, you know what I mean? The community as a whole, especially black people, I'm just going to be specific, and whites, I don't want to lead them, and everybody. The community as a whole does not know what a police officer can and cannot do. That's just what it boils down to. Nobody knows what gives an officer the right from the minute he see you do a civil infraction on the street, his reason for flicking that light, you know, when he pull over. There's laws that governs those type actions, which the public don't even have no clue of. You know what I mean? They don't understand that the incident that happened with George Floyd, that was a situation of use of force policy. Half of y'all in here already don't even know what that means. Only person that knows what that means, only a person that's been in law enforcement. You know what I mean? So I don't want to because we're gonna get more in depth in this as we go. But I'll just end it here. So I'm glad we're having this discussion. There's a lot of policies that governs a police officer action. You know what I mean? All the way from the time they come up to your car. You know what I mean? There's laws that govern that stuff. You know what I mean? As well as, even from the point when they put handcuffs on you. It goes back to their use of force policy. Now, how can we get involved as far as income inequality? I'd be happy to have that discussion as well. Pretty much some of the points you brought up, I can get down to the root of it. So basically, I'm coming with a whole lot of knowledge on so many levels.
Well, to that point, real quick, not to cut you off, Will, you referenced law enforcement, but will you briefly mention your space now in the real estate spectrum? Because something I plan on talking about is redlining and gerrymandering, and how when we had fiscal resources from a state level, from a local level, from a federal level, we were still crushed, and we were still not afforded the opportunity to have an intentional conversation about intergenerational wealth from home ownership.
Get to that. Okay. This is phase 2 of my life. I know I got to put that. This is phase 2. Colorado is now phase 2 of my life. I've been out here 4 years now. I'm enjoying it. It's very peaceful. Second phase of my life now, I am a realtor. I do real estate full time with Via Terra Real Estate. So, to answer your question again, could you repeat it?
Well, no, I just wanted you to say that part.
Yeah,
so
I'm
that
also a
some
realtor,
context.
full-time realtor. I was in the midst of all that coming here. That's why I was late. My apologies. But nevertheless, yeah, I can touch on that on so many levels in terms of income, equality, because you got to understand, where I come from, Detroit, the things that's happening in the world, this is repeat history for me. It's not new. You get what I'm saying? If we go back during the Rodney King incident, Detroit had a similar situation happen during that time frame too, around 1992. We had an officer, two racist police officer, that beat a black citizen by the name of Malice Green. The two officers' name was Butson and Nevers. You can look it up on Google. I'm not making this up. Butsons and Nevers, Malice Green. He was beat by those two officers with a flashlight, and it killed him. I actually went to see his viewing when that was going on. I was just coming out of high school. So basically, all I'm saying that to say this, we, Detroit City as a whole, is not new to what's happening out here in the world. You get what I'm saying? We've been there. That's one of the reasons now when you see police departments now carrying the small flashlight, because then they was carrying them pipe-sized mag flashlights. Those flashlights has been banned pretty much across the country because of that one situation. Look it up, research it yourself, fact check me. You know, I ain't got no reason to lie up here because I ain't getting paid nothing for it anyway. So, you know what I'm saying? But with that said, you know what I'm saying? That changed the whole culture. So we march, we protest, all that, changes took place. We as a whole in that community, we went numb. I'm tired of us saying going numb. I'm tired of us singing, you know, we shall overcome someday. You know what I mean? I'm tired of that. So there's specific things we need to do, particularly as African American people, that we can start taking place now with understanding history. And I'll touch on more of that as we go further in the conversation. But that's who I am, so I'll leave it at that for now.
Very much appreciated. Very much appreciated. And to that point, I want to reiterate my appreciation for my panelists because I didn't make reference to this a month ago. As Mr. Hambright mentioned, we were literally on the call yesterday, and he stipend time, and he segmented out the opportunity in his schedule to join us. Same with Edgar. Had a conversation with him, and he afforded us the privilege to have his presence, as with Stacey, because this is a very intentional conversation. I don't believe we're having the conversation amongst friends and family here, nor with all of you joining us via live stream or those that will watch it later. We're talking a white America. we've had the conversations amongst friends and families that we're familiar with, family members that we're already familiar with. We're talking to people that have board members whom are white, serving a population that's diverse with no diversity at the helm of that ranking system. We're talking to those nonprofit organizations that have board members whom are white, that serve their communities and their populations of diverse members with no diversity in those positions of power and in those positions of authority. To dig back into having that conversation with Edgar, with Stacey, and with Wil, I'd like to first make reference to some facts, because I think another reason we're here is because with all of our respective professions, we thrive in a space of talking about data. Let's talk about data. Let's talk about facts, because I think a lot of what people are hearing and a lot of what people are experiencing are feelings. And that's cool. It's very much necessary. Life is a feeling process. But facts are what we live and die by. So let's talk about facts. First off, I'd like to reference, she committed against her will, is of the same opinion still. Let that resonate whenever you have a moment later. She committed against her will, is of the same opinion still. Gotta have an open heart, gotta have an open mind, and when you open your mouth, you have to be on the receiving end of someone else doing the same, to have an intentional conversation towards building out and establishing and covering any real ground. Second thing I want to point out is I'm more concerned with what you're hearing, audience here, audience virtually. I'm more concerned with what you're hearing than what I'm saying. I'm more concerned with what you're hearing than what they're saying, because these are individuals whom I have somewhat of an affiliation with, a friendship with, a familiarity with professionally. I don't know you all. So feel free to chime in, hit that chat box, ask all the questions necessary, and I promise towards the latter end of this discussion, we'll get to several of them, if not all of them. Down to the facts. 1964, Civil Rights Act. It was illegal to discriminate against blacks. Then they killed Martin Luther King. 1971, President Nixon establishes the war on drugs, primarily targeting hippies and blacks. He leaves office in 1974. 1987, the CIA sent crack to black communities. As Mr. Hambright said, you can Google it, and there's no reason to BS now that we're here together. It's all facts. Sent crack to black communities to fund a war in Nicaragua. Now, who's the whistleblower in this? Gentleman by the name of Webb. Where is Webb? Webb is dead. How did Webb die? Webb shot himself in the head, in the back of the head, twice. Let that sit with you. 1994, crime bill. Historic numbers associated with black people being incarcerated. Private prisons establishing relationships with businesses, having a quota for a yearly occupancy rate that then afforded those businesses to obtain free labor, because the 13th Amendment allowed for this practice. Now here we are in 2020. Racism afforded by banks, by police, by civilians. And the data indicates that the government is responsible for such a vast percentage of what we're now dealing with. And that's a reflection of top-down leadership, ladies and gentlemen. So now we want to kind of talk about the residue and the aftermath of things, when we should really be having a conversation about the origin of things. So with that said, I'd like to get back to my panel and ask a few questions associated with, and I'll start with you, Edgar, and then we'll move down the line. What do you value about the realization that we're in right now, and what do you believe that we can do about it?
I think the biggest value that we could take from it is that more people are starting to see what we've already known. So me being Mexican, this is stuff that we've already seen. Like we've seen this. Like we already knew it existed, but I think there's a lot more people that are starting to understand and starting to get it. People that typically wouldn't get it, or people would typically say, oh, you're just playing the victim role, are starting to understand it. I think there's an overcorrection, which I think we need to be careful with all at the same time, because that overcorrection can be deadly as well. But I think that's the biggest value, is now we've got more eyes with social media and different platforms and technology. And I think that's something that can't be ignored. And we need to learn how to utilize those tools to provide those facts. And provide those facts eloquently, and provide those facts without kind of what was mentioned in the video, is without forgetting the why we're doing all of this stuff. Because again, we do get caught up in what we're doing and forget about why we're doing it very quick. Yeah. Very, very quick. So biggest value for me is just more people are starting to see what we already knew.
Dope. And the second half of that question was, what do you think we can do about it?
That's the tough thing, is I think as a group, even with my activism, whether it be with guns or whether it be with immigration or whether it be with whatever it is, we always want, as a collective, we always want to look for somebody who's going to be the leader. And I think that's the biggest mistake, is always trying to find this one person who's going to lead us to the promised land. And the reality is that we all have to collectively do something together. Like, we don't need any one individual to lead us there. We all have to do what we feel is best, because the reality is my little circle, the way you and I run together, is different than somebody else's circle is going to run. We can't do something there's no one-size-fits-all solution. And I think that's the problem, is everybody wants to find this one-size-fits-all solution, and there's not. So it's tough, because I don't know what we can do from here, to be honest with you. I don't know. I know what I would do from here, and that's just continue my fight and continue my truth and continue voicing my opinion. Again, I don't know anybody here except you. You know, I don't shy away from voicing my opinion in any way, shape, or form. And that's the best thing that I can do, is show my truth so everybody can show their truth. Even if it's even if it's an evil truth, right. At least we know who the fuck you are and where you stand and how far away to stay from you. So
6 feet. 6 feet.
6 feet. Yeah. So it's a hard question to answer. What do we do? Because the reality is that every circle is going to need a different solution. Every city, Detroit is not Denver. Exactly. It's going to need a different solution. Exactly. So the South is different than out here in the West. It's different. So there's no one size fits all. And I think that's what we have to understand. And sometimes I was having this discussion on a podcast, this idea of, we have to find a common ground. Sometimes we're not going to find common ground, right. And that's okay. Right. Like sometimes you're just going to be over there and I'm going to be over here, and we're not going to find common ground. It doesn't mean I hate you. It doesn't mean I wish ill on those people that don't agree with me. It's just we're not going to mesh, and that's okay.
Definitely. Stacey, what do you take away the biggest, or what do you value about the realization that we're in, and what do you believe we can do about it now?
I think there's two things that I really value about what's happening right now for me personally. So on a personal level, I've cared about this issue for a long time. It wasn't something I learned about growing up. It wasn't something I talked about growing up. I grew up in a very privileged white middle-class family. Mm-hmm. And I started to learn more about it when I went to college, when I got my master's degree, when I started interning with different nonprofits. And I never felt like I could have a voice in the conversation. And so actually our conversation yesterday, Jay Hood, started to change my perspective about that, because I don't think that we can start to change the white community's mind about it until, I mean, for me personally, I don't think that I can expect them to change their mind until I can be brave enough to speak up about my truth and what I know exists and how systemic racism works. Because I think people aren't afforded those opportunities in education and in school. And so we need to talk about it and make some noise about it so that people listen, so that people will research on their own, so that people will Google different concepts, because we have to put those out there for people to care about and to listen to. Professionally, as the executive director of an organization that works with people in prison, it's an issue that is extremely close to my heart, and our volunteer base is largely wealthy white people that come into prison, and they get to feel really good about mentoring people and helping people that are incarcerated. And one concept that they can all get behind is people make mistakes. People deserve second chances. And the thing that I say to them all the time is, this might not be a second chance. This is a first chance for a lot of people. The Black community makes up 13% of Americans, but 50% of the incarcerated population. So there is stuff that is happening on a systemic level that is incarcerating Black and brown people at higher rates, and we need to be looking at those and addressing those. And that common, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, one individual at a time, that's great, and we can help the people that are in our program with that, but it shouldn't remain that way. And so I'm excited now that I think for our small little community and our little nonprofit that our mentors and our volunteers are going to be more willing to have that conversation and look at the systemic issues and look past the one individual, one mistake, second chance mentality and say, why are they here in the first place? Like, what can we get to at the root of this issue?
I love that. Thank you so much for that. And Mr. Hambright, what do you value about the realization? What do you believe we can do about it?
What I value about the realization right now is the fact that, like I said, we're not new to this. Edgar touched on some of the points, which is true. We're not new to this. For me, it's like history repeating itself. I can go in several directions with this. This rabbit hole can go deep, you know what I mean? But just to keep it current to what's happening now, I like the fact that our young people are starting to be engaged now. It appears that white America, I hate putting it like that, you know what I mean, but, just speak truth from the heart. It's starting to take notice now with this movement that took place with Black Lives Matter. You know what I mean? You got governors and people like Mitt Romney and everybody coming to the forefront, starting to realize that, there is an issue there that we've suppressed for so long. You know what I mean? Like Edgar said again, and he makes a very clear point. And, him being a brown person, we always knew it's been there. I'll give you an example. When I go to work in corporate America, it's different when a white person goes to work with corporate America. You may, now the other side may not see, oh, we all are equal. But no, when I go to work as corporate America and you go to work as corporate America, I'm already, because of the systemic environment or racism or prejudice or whatever you want to call it that exists, I automatically, especially when I go in a place where I'm the only Black person, I'm already on guard. Is that fair to say? You already got your guard up. You know what I mean? You already know that I'm going to be scrutinized the most than my white counterpartners. And we all are equal far as pay. We may be new, we may be rookies, or whatever the case may be. But mine gonna get called out to the floor quicker than my white counterparts because they gonna help their own. That's just the reality of it. They're gonna sit there, they're gonna say, hey, Johnny or Jesse or whatever his name is, this is how you do this better. But if I do the exact same thing, mine gonna get called to the carpet much quicker where I'm in the office talking to the boss or whatever the case may be, and you're now documenting stuff. Well, this just a council. That ain't no council. That's BS, man. You slowly documenting things to get rid of me. How many of y'all been through that? That's African American. I see a few heads nod out here. So that's my point. That kind of culture. You get what I'm saying? So as we're talking about the issue of race, especially racism, it's an issue of the heart. You know what I mean? And do I have the answer for that? That's a hard thing to think because I don't know what you're thinking. Even though you're up here with us, you know, deep down inside, I really don't know where your true heart and desire lies. You know what I mean? So that's what we're dealing with in America. And the fact that this movement is now taking place, I would like to believe that America, hopefully, now seeing, you know, because we just had recently the NFL just now apologize for the kneeling and everything. They didn't mention, I hope I'm saying it, Colin Kaepernick. They didn't mention him, but nevertheless, they made apologies for it. But even with that said, on that level alone, I like to believe people are starting to become more in tune. Now, the next question, how can we change it, right? How can we change it? The first element of change, now I'm only speaking to us as African American now. We got to stop playing the victim. You can't change nothing until you first start healed. Now, I understand slavery, all this stuff took place. This wound can go deep. It goes deep for me because my great-granddad, I just found it located his grave. I'm talking about my great-granddad. He grew up, he was born 1851. So he was during that time, during Harriet Tubman, the Emancipation Proclamation about to get whatever, and Abraham Lincoln era. He was born in Alabama. He lived 100 years. He died 1951. You get what I'm saying? So it's deep. He lived 100 years, and I saw his grave for the first time. It's not really a grave. It's just a rock they took, and they scratched his name there. You know what I mean? Willie J. Hambright, 1851 to 19. It's very can see it, but it's there. But that was touching to me. So I can only imagine the frustration, the lynching, and all that he had to endure coming through that era. You get what I'm saying? So that runs deep core to, that's in my blood. You get what I'm saying? Alabama, Greensboro, Alabama. But even with that said, I like to believe America now, I hope, is starting to come to realization that this is an issue of the heart. How we can change as individuals, we first got to heal ourselves. We as black people and brown people got to get serious about education. We got to start showing up when issues matter, when it comes to voting. We got to stop disrespecting authority, because I admit we do have PTSD because of what we've been through and all the things we discussed in that little dialogue you had. So we're a little, I'm just going to be blunt, a little messed up in the head. I want to say effed up in the head, but I'm trying to keep it clean. But, you know, we're a little messed up in the head right now. You get what I'm saying? Through all of that. But nevertheless, now, moving forward, we in today's time right now, right? We understand what happened. We can't continue sitting there playing the victim. You know what I mean? We can't continue to sit and playing the victim. We got to understand the reality we live in now and come up with solution as individuals on what can first help me, better me, which is always education. Education first, then your health is second, because you can't do nothing if you're not healthy. You know what I mean? You ain't an asset to nobody, because eventually you'll be dead. So you ain't nothing to nobody anyway, because you ain't here to help nobody in the first place. So it's yourself first, God, relation, whatever your morals, your values is first, then yourself. Then after that, because I'm a healthy person, now I can be a contributing factor to my community. Some of the things that Edgar was touching on, he's right. My reality from Detroit, Michigan is totally different from this reality in Colorado. The unique thing, and I have to commend y'all, you all, I'm part of Colorado now, so I'm here. But the unique thing now about Colorado that I do love, that you all don't have the same issues like a Detroit have, because Detroit is really socially segregated. Blacks live with blacks, white live with whites, Jews live with Jews, Hispanics live with him. We got a Hispanic town, they call it, Mexican town, they call it. Asian lives with Asians. Dearborn is all Arabic. I don't know if y'all recall during the 9/11, George W. Bush made reference to Dearborn, Michigan, which is right next to Detroit. It's like Denver to Aurora. That's how close Dearborn, Michigan. It has the largest Arabic community in the region, from what I was told. And they got money. I mean, they rich. So you go over there, you know what I mean, they dress to their culture and everything. So it's socially segregated there. All the people I've ever been to school with was my own kind, blacks. You know what I mean? So it's a lot different here in Denver, because what I like about here, and that was the reason I left Detroit, because I wanted to broaden my horizon. Y'all are multiculturally diverse here, which I kind of like. So you all don't really have the same social issue. They still, white-black issues there, real white-black issue. And when you understand the issues and the cultures from that time, from the South migrating to the North, you'll kind of understand why that's still here in that region. You know what I mean? As opposed to what happened in Minneapolis. All the Midwest has always been a little socially segregated, but even to this day. But you all in Colorado here, y'all somewhat don't really have that problem, because, there is not like a black community or white community or Jewish community. You see some segregation, probably in Mount Bello, I'm starting to see of a Hispanic, but for the most part, everybody pretty much lives amongst each other here. So I can't speak on changes in terms of how Denver, Colorado, in other words, I'm trying to say I can't compare Detroit changes with the Denver, Colorado, because like he said, those are two different changes. You know what I mean? They have their own separate social issues. I like the fact that we here are open to talk about it. That's the first step of it. But to answer the question, we, and I'm speaking specifically to us, we got to first heal ourselves. We got to first start getting educated. We got to show up when things matter. We got to start supporting good things and good people who exude value. Now, you're going to have your knuckleheads out there, those individuals that are not going to, they're not going to have any value. Well, okay, leave them in the corner where they are. You categorize them. But those individuals who exude good moral value, characters, stop training your kids to hate the police. Stop training your kids to hate any form of authority, because that ain't going to help nobody. Start training them to become leaders. That goes back to education. This thing can go even deeper. How far you want this rabbit hole to go? You know what I mean? Even in school, American and African history study should be a mandatory, elective. I'm not in the educated world, so I can't really speak on that. But that needs to be something where people need to have in their schools, where black, brown, white can fully understand their culture and their background. So we got a gridlock cap on that, because none of our faces is controlling that. So that's contributing a little bit when you agree to the systemic racism that's in the model that's being put out. So this thing can go really deep. But to answer it on a simple level, we got to heal ourselves first. Once we heal ourselves, we got to get serious about our identity and who we are and what value. So I like what Edgar said when he said, and I'll end right here. Everybody's looking for one leader. There's no more Martin Luther King per se. You know what I mean? Everybody have to become that Martin Luther King. Everybody have to become that Barack Obama, whoever that is. Everybody is an individual leader in themselves. You get what I'm saying? And you strive upon that leadership by doing what's moral, doing what's ethics, and whatever is not good, don't contribute, and be an asset and benefit to the whole society as a whole.
So I think one of the things that you mentioned is about this not playing a victim role, which I'm all about. But I think what a lot of people forget is that I cannot be a victim and still protest. I cannot be a victim and still be loud about my pain. I cannot be a victim, do my thing as an entrepreneur, start businesses and handle my own, and still be loud about the shit that needs to be loud about. And I think that's what we do wrong in the U.S. I've seen it I've seen the way shit works in Mexico. I use bad words, so I'm not gonna stop doing that.
Ain't no kids here. Got one over there. Be all right.
Oh, he's old enough.
He's all right.
He says it too. And I never seen it in Mexico. Now I don't go back to Mexico as much as I used to, but I just never really seen it there. Now, granted, in fairness, I never really lived in Mexico to really compare 100% apples to apples. But it seems like in the U.S. it's just like you got to be this one way and that's it. We hear Joe Biden talk about if you don't vote for me, you're not black. Like what gives you the right to you're not entitled to my vote just because of the color of my skin or my culture or whatever. You're a victim, so because you're a victim, you can't be an entrepreneur. Like we pigeonhole people here to if you're this, you could only be that, and that's it. And then we make up the definitions for the certain thing. I consider myself to be an anarchist. There's like standard things that I talk about every single time that I introduce myself. Me as an anarchist, I don't go around breaking shit. Like that actually goes against what a real anarchist believes, because that's not my shit. I'm not gonna go break your shit. I'm gonna leave your stuff alone. It's really more live and let live. Like that's really what real anarchism is. But we have it in our head what anarchist is. So like, oh, if you say you're an anarchist, you're a horrendous human being, and that's it. And I think that's one of the things, like if we were going to talk about what to do next, is we got to stop labeling people and then just holding them to because you're black, you could only do this and that's it. Like you could only play basketball and
Shut
that's
up and
it.
dribble.
Yeah, that's it. Shut up and dribble, and that's all you can do. I'm Mexican, so I just go mow lawns and go cook your fucking food and grow your food and shit like that, and then to just go to my corner and that's it. The reality is it's just much more complex. We're all, as individuals, we're much more complex. I don't subscribe this idea that this is just it. So all that to say is I can be an individual who's going to thrive and not be a victim, but I can still bitch about stuff. You know, that's how things get fixed. I've been married for 20 years. I got married when I was 15 years of age. I've been married to the same woman since then, 20 years, I'm sorry. And the only way we fix our relationship when shit is wrong is we bitch about it. Like, hey, this is fucked up. We're going to correct it. We're going to fix it. It does take, it is a two-way system, but it doesn't make me a victim about anything. It just, like, we're still thriving. I mean, 20 years. I got married when I was 15. By all statistics, we shouldn't be together. I should have been on my third wife or whatever. But the reality is that we fixed this by talking about it and actually working at it. It doesn't make me a victim. It just means we just talked about it. We got to stop just pigeonholing people. It's just like, because you're this, you can't be anything else except that, and that's just not. It's much more complex than that, and we got to understand that. It just we're complex as shit.
Well, I think to that point, unless Stacey, would you like to make any remark on that? Okay. To that point, white America has created a space, and I don't want to just blame civilians and individuals whom are here or whom are breathing. As I mentioned, the government had a very substantial role in shaping and building and molding what we have to live in. So back to the space of what I wanted to discuss associated with facts and not feelings, I had a few definitions. So I'll read these definitions, and then after this, I have a few more questions that I'd like to ask, but I know we're limited on time. We're down to about 50 minutes now, and so I'll read the definitions, and shortly thereafter, I kind of just want to give you all a few moments just to discuss what's on your heart. And then we'll get to another video. I'll ask Mr. Fitz to cue up the next video. And then I'll get to some additional questions that I'd like to ask for our audience members. And then I'll cue up any questions that we have here, any questions that you all have at home or on the beach in Cancun. I don't know where you all are, but I'm sure you're someplace beautiful with the sun is out. Hope it's not raining. Definitions. A stereotype is an exaggerated belief, image, or distorted truth about a person or group. A generalization that allows for that allows for little or no individual differences or social variation. Stereotypes are based on images in mass media or reputations passed on by parents, peers, and other members of society. Stereotypes can be positive or negative. A prejudice is an opinion, prejudgment, or attitude about a group or its individual members. A prejudice can be positive, but in our usage refers to a negative attitude. Prejudice are often accompanied by ignorance, fear, or hatred. Prejudices are formed by a complex psychological process that begins with an attachment to a close circle of acquaintances or an in-group, such as a family. Prejudice is often aimed at out-groups. Discrimination. Discrimination is behavior that treats people unequally because of their group memberships. Discriminatory behavior, ranging from slights to hate crimes, often begins with negative stereotypes and prejudices. Thank you. So, Edgar, whatever's on your heart, take a few moments. Stacey, whatever's on your heart, take a few moments. Will, whatever's on your heart, a few moments, please, and then we'll cue up a second video. And Edgar?
I didn't know you were going to talk about this, so I think I already said everything I was going to say about prejudice and understanding that we're all individuals. So yeah, I mean, I really don't have much to add in that conversation, but I think we always have to remember is follow, like, where's the shit? Like, where's it at? You always have to follow that where it all started. I know even within my community, we started talking about Latinx and stuff like that. Like, I don't consider myself a Latino or a Hispanic because I know where those words came from. They didn't come from Mexicans. They didn't come from Hispanics or Latinos. They came from a certain sect in society that wanted to label us as a certain type of individual. So I think it's our responsibility to stop those stereotypes. When you get to understand who I am, like, it's such a weird, like, I'm weird as
You
fuck.
are, bro.
Like,
You funny.
it's yeah, like, you
But you're versatile. I think you're versatile.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that, but I don't fit the mold. Like, I don't fit what people think of me. Oh, you're Mexican, so you're this or that. Like, no, I just happen to be Mexican. Like, I am this human being, and I just happen to be Mexican. I just happen to be an anchor baby, and I just happen to be ESL. But this is who I really am. I'm this complex individual who's managed to run a successful business in spite of all the bullshit society thinks I should be with. Homeless as a teenager. That's just stuff that just happens to be a truth in my life. And I slowly chip away from those stereotypes because of it. And I think we just got to understand that about each other is we need to understand where all of this stuff came from. Because I see, unfortunately, people in the Mexican community and black communities repeating the shit that was taught to us by the people who used to, quote unquote, own us or
Oppressors.
The oppressors, exactly. We repeat that shit. You were talking about voting. Like, I don't, this is the unpopular opinion, but I don't vote because of it, because I don't like to vote for an oppressor. I don't like to choose a ruler who's going to rule over me. If we look at history, like nothing's changed. Like the poor communities have stayed poor. I don't give a shit who's in power. They stay poor. Like nobody's helping those communities. The only ones that can help each other is us. And I'm talking about us, not just black people and brown people. I'm talking about us. Like those are the ones that help. When I need help, I go to Jay, or I go to Isaac, or I go to a family member. I don't go to the government. Like the government's never really going to be in my favor. In fact, for me anyways, government has always been the destroyer. I know you were talking about respecting authority. We got to, at the same time, like kind of be careful on who we give that authority to. One of the questions that you asked earlier is how come cops can get away with so much shit? Because we allow them to. Government gets away with so much shit because we allow them to. We have given them the power to do all this stuff because we keep repeating all that stuff. I think we just got to get to this point where it's just like we got to stop that stereotype of us being the oppressed and not subscribe to any of that shit. So I don't know if it made sense, but I felt good about it.
I just want to hang out with you more. It's like, I'm so weird. I'm like, I love that. I need to know all the things. I get really amped up about the language that we use to define people, to pigeonhole them, to create stereotypes that reinforce prejudice, right? And since I work in the field of the incarcerated population, I notice that the most with the word criminal and people calling people criminals, or specifically for who I work with, prisoners, inmates. And we do that with labels because it dehumanizes people. It removes them. It makes them other or different. And I think we do that in so many different facets and in so many different ways in life, and constantly putting labels on other people instead of getting to know the intricacies, the things that make people weird, the things that make people themselves, the things that they're passionate about or excited about. And so I think it's sometimes as complicated yet as simple as if we choose our own language and choose the way that we talk about people, we can recognize the diversity and the uniqueness and all of the things that make us us. But I think it's easier to remove those labels when we get face to face with people. Prejudice and stereotypes are easier to maintain when we don't have face to face interactions with folks. So if you're a white person and you notice that you don't engage with a lot of people of color, be vulnerable. Put yourself out there. Get in those situations. Find communities that have people of color. Make that happen, right? And that is where I think that change is going to start happening. One thing that I've been thinking about a lot this whole conversation, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, is the concept of equity. And the best way that I've ever seen it described is with do you guys ever read The Giving Tree, the book? So there's the cartoon tree, and it's curved like this. And there's two people, and they're trying to get the apples off the tree. And they give one person a ladder. That would be the white person in our society, right? They have the ladder. They're on the lower side of the tree because the tree is curved, and they can pick the apples. And everybody else is on the ground trying to figure out how to get the apples from the tree. Equality is maybe giving everybody else a ladder, right? And maybe you give them a taller ladder so they can reach the other side of the tree that's further up, that's harder to get. But equity is figuring out how to straighten the tree, how to make a baseline even for all people. So those systems that we have put into place over time are bending the tree in favor of other people. And if we want equity, we have to start removing those barriers and evening things back out.
I love that. And something I hope we talk about shortly after this video is, I think 2008 showed us a lot. When the housing market crashed, people jumped out of windows, families crumbled, divorces ran rampant, whole society just kind of crumbled in a sense. Coronavirus comes along, something similar occurs, where the haves typically have, and a lot of people become have-nots. So there's an incentive intertwined in there somewhere where people have an interest in making sure that nobody else has shit. But we'll get to that shortly after the video. Mr. Hambright, I'd love for you to take a moment. Anything on your heart relevant to either those definitions or otherwise, a few moments, and then we'll cue up the next video.
I'll be brief. You all pretty much hit some of the common core. But I'll just say this. Being from Detroit, like I said, it's really different there than here. Racism, you know, is something that's pretty known there, you know what I mean? Because the people that migrated from the South came to the North to get the jobs. You can study the history. I'm not making any of this up. Those individuals during that Jim Crow era migrated to the North with the job. They pretty much brought that mindset, raised their kid, mostly during the baby boomer era, and raised people like me. I'm 46 years old, which we call Generation X. So you still have that era that kind of surfaced there. I'll say out here in Colorado, y'all really is not like that. I mean, me coming from Detroit, I can tell if somebody is being sincere. I can locate their heart if they're being genuine. I can locate where they've been, if they're being fake or phony, because it's really, really big there. You get what I'm saying? So I said all that to say this. I moved out here to Colorado to broaden my horizon. And I'm going to be honest with you. This is the first time out here that I can honestly say I got white friends or I got white people of multiracial, because, like I said, because Detroit is so socially segregated, the only people I ever went to school with look just like me. You know, that's comfortable in a sense. But the problem with that is I left because the mindset there is still kind of stagnated and limited. The only reality of is only people, the reality that they live in that region. You know what I'm saying? So if you have like a white person who lives like in the northern part of Michigan, who just happened to become a cop, they have these stereotypes and perception of black people or brown people, what have you, about a certain community. I've worked around officers that treat who never even seen a prostitute, who never seen a crackhead on the boulevard, who never seen a homeless person because they lived up in the northern part of Michigan. So with that said, you know, they come there, they get in the police car, and they, in their heart, because everything we're talking about, racism, prejudice, it's all an issue of the heart, and it's what you've been learned and trained. You know what I mean? You talk to that person rudely. You will slam them on the ground. Let's just take George Floyd. I really think that was an issue of the heart that caused him to do all those things. You know what I mean? Because he broke every code of ethics. You know what I mean? We got a code of ethics that say, as a law enforcement officer, I will serve my community. I ain't going to say all of it because it's about 6 paragraphs long. You know what I mean? You know. And it's another part in there that said, I will maintain courageous calm under face of danger, scorn, and ridicule. Only people that know that are police officers. So I'm saying, I don't care how tight the situation get, you're supposed to be maintain calmness and control in all situations. But you'll have individuals come down there and intentionally mistreat an individual. But if you got a sector or group of people who thinks like those individuals, and they all flock together like birds, they ain't gonna honor that, and they're gonna protect their own. That's the thing we gotta deal with. So I just want to end on this note. I'm happy to be in Colorado. Y'all are my new family now. I got a complete diverse group. I'm telling y'all really, really broadened my horizon. I mean, I got white friends, Mexican friends now. Even if we ain't friends, I got associates. I got people I can call. I got a friend from Somalia. I got another friend from Russia.
So I'm going to interject as a native of Denver, just encouraging everybody out there, like, no, it's horrible here in Denver. Please stop
Please
moving
don't
here.
move here.
Just stop it.
here.
He's making it sound way too fucking nice.
Hey, I got here by default, y'all.
He's lying.
I didn't just
horrendous
plan
here.
to come here. I just kind of landed on Plymouth Rock.
It is horrendous here.
Then I just happened to, like, this is not so bad. I do miss my soul, though, man. I do ballroom dance and step and all that good stuff. So I used to live down there.
I just want to add something, and sorry to interrupt, but it just, that ADD kicks in, and it's just like, I got to say some shit. One of the things, and just to stir the pot here a little bit, you were talking about the white people coming in and the flat tree and shit like that. I think one of the things that we have to, I make it sound like you just made a horrible, and I apologize for that. One of the things that we have to be careful with, and Dave Chappelle shared a story. I'm going to keep it short, and I think this is what we have to be careful with, and I think white people need to be careful with this stuff, is Chappelle shared a story about a pimp back in the 50s or 60s, I don't remember exactly when, about how his top performer, his top girl, his bottom bitch, was kind of at the end of her ropes. And one of the things this pimp did was ask one more favor of this lady, and then that's go turn one more trick and steal money and pour some powder in his drink, steal some money, and chick comes back like, I think I killed the guy. And the pimp stages the whole thing. The pimp he stages it because he's seen that this lady was at the end of her rope. So what he did is he staged it. It was a fake death. It was a fake cover-up. But he made himself feel like he was the hero. Like, I'm the one that protected you from this. Disregard the fact that he was the one that was putting her in the situations that she was in, creating the volatile environment, the toxic environment for this lady, as the pimp of this lady, as the oppressor of this lady. But when she was at the end of her rope, this guy's like, I'm the one that saved you. So we have to be careful with that in the black and brown communities. We have a lot of politicians who pay that same lip service. Like, they see us at the end of the rope. They see us about to fucking just crash and burn. And then, I mean, they wonder why we're doing this shit, why people are protesting and why people are just fed up with this shit. And then they come in and are like, well, you know what? This is what we're going to give you. Because of that, we're going to give you this. Not understanding that we're still in the same shitty situation. We just feel good for a temporary amount of time. No different than when they give us $1,200 just to make things better. Like, that doesn't make things better. We got to understand that shit doesn't change the fact that they're still the oppressor. They're still the ones that created this environment. They're still the ones that are causing the pain. Right. We got to stop with this falling for this shit and understand. And I think what the responsibility from the white community is sometimes we don't need a savior. Like, I don't need you to save me. I don't need you to tell me how I feel about my people and how I feel towards black people or about immigration. So I think we get told by a lot of people, and now I'm doing the stereotyping here. We get told by a lot of people, oh, this is how you should feel about this, and I'm here to save you because of this. And it's just like, I don't want your saving. I just want you to sometimes get the fuck out the way, let us do what we're going to do, and that's it. Plain and simple. That's it.
That's dope, and it's truth. Was there anything you wanted to add on the tail end of that, Will?
No, I just want to end on that note and just say, to finish out, stereotype racism is all the issue of the heart. And being that this movement is now out now, I don't want to see it die. What I do appreciate is you all are out here, and we are here to have this open discussion about it. And I don't think this should die. So it comes back to, whatever your moral, religious belief is come back to a soul check of the heart, and ask yourself, is what I'm doing benefiting the good of people or who I'm encountering? No, we're not going to agree on everything. My philosophy is this, is what the Bible said. Nobody theoretically owes you anything personally, but the Bible said the only thing I do owe you is love. So as long as I can respect you, we can agree to disagree, but I'm not going to hurt or harm you in any way. I still want to see you progress. And I think if a lot of people carry that mindset, it'll kind of suppress a lot of this systemic racism, prejudice, stereotype, all this stuff that goes on.
Dope. All right, so a few things I want to cover, and then we'll cut to another video clip for the viewers at home, and those streaming and those capable of watching later. Again, here in real time, we'll have the audio. I want to talk about the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, and what can be done to heal, because people are pretty fed up with trauma. So I'd love for that to just be on your thought process and in your think tank as we cut to this next film. And a few more things I wanted to cover prior. This is not per se my call to action, but I mentioned earlier that I don't really give a shit about Congress and the Senate and the Kente Clause, and as Edgar touched on, the lip service of our politicians. One thing that's true about our community is that in the MLK space, in the Huey P. Newton space, in the Asada space, in the spaces of the Malcolm X's of the world, and even the Angela Davises of the world, when black people give a damn about black people are killed. Black people are discouraged from discussing issues that plague black communities, because if we protest in the most defined, refined, and professional fashion appropriate, we're murdered. Martin Luther King got shot. He didn't die from a bullet wound. He was smothered in the hospital bed. The government was found guilty of it. We're killed. And to a different point, as Edgar also hinted to, we have elected officials who get into positions of authority and power, and now they're in control of budgets, and now they're in a position to do some things, and then they take on this theory of bless my four and no more, and they abandon the very same communities that they pretend to serve. So we need to stop treating our politicians like celebrities and as though we're privileged to have their presence, when that's their job. They're supposed to show up. They're supposed to invest. One more thing I wanted to touch on before I asked Mr. Fitz to cue up the last video is that there's a depth to the fact that people go behind closed doors, they mismanage the resources, they sell one another out, and some of our leaders lose their sense of reasoning. Mm-hmm. And something I just wanted to hint towards and not touch on in depth is that chromium, for instance, is a mineral. And there are so many natural resources throughout Africa. But the price of chromium is set in Belgium. So we can talk about chromium, we can talk about gold, we can talk about oil, and how certain facets of this very earth that are mined in Africa are still managed by people in New York or in Holland. My call to action for people in positions of authority: give everybody 200 points on their credit score. Stop with the lip service. You don't need your 13th yacht or your 15th Rolls Royce. And your intergenerational wealth is secured because of what your forefathers have secured for you. Stop being greedy. Greed is a disease that's plaguing us because people think that there's not anyone else deserving of anything, and it's bullshit. So, with no further ado, Mr. Fitz, will you please cue up the second video?
Real quick, do you know how many minerals are in here?
In your phone? So the question for those at home that couldn't hear, an audience member, Mr. Don Rosa, asked.
I don't know the answer, but I know it's many that are mined in Africa.
So the question is, how many minerals are in your phone, in your device? And the answer is we don't know, but it's a lot of them, and a lot of them are coming from Africa too. So there's a truth to the realities of life. Mr. Fitz? So a few things I'd like to touch on before I get back to the panel. Well, I guess in the midst of getting to the panel. So if either of you would like to chime in for any of these questions, I'd love to get your take. I really don't want to, I don't want you to have to succumb to any timing constraints, but I want to be respectful of everything that we've kind of set in stone with regards to our viewership and our audience members and anything that you all may even have on your schedules. So please limit the timing of your response. Question was posed, how do you address the fact that even with a black president, we still had the same issues during his tenure? I have a very short answer. Again, anyone feel free to chime in as well. My immediate answer is, the president is a puppet. So at the end of the day, there's somebody in a position that has a particular celebrity. However, those in positions of power are still those in positions of power. So whether we're talking about the executive branch or the judicial branch, there are branches of government. But in hindsight, similar to what I referenced before about business, you have an organization that may or may not have a board of directors. And that organization may have money funneling to a nonprofit, which typically has to have a board of directors. And if those individuals that create an opportunity are not creating an opportunity because there's no diversity and there's no true justice or there's no reform or there's no leverage of equality established, well then nothing is going to change. So that's my answer to the question of how do we address the fact that even with a black president, the same issues occur during his tenure and thereafter. Would any of you like to chime in? Go ahead.
What I think that was mentioned in that video, in that clip, was this idea of normalizing stuff. Everything just becomes normal, and that's exactly what we have. Is just we've normalized a certain amount of oppression. We've normalized the overreach of power. We've normalized keeping a certain sect down. I'm up here as the gun guy, and I haven't even talked about guns. Ironically, I don't see myself as the gun guy. A lot of people see me as the gun guy. But even if we look at it at that point, if we go way back in history, our very first gun laws were to oppress the black community. And we've normalized that to the point where the people who are saying they're going to help the black community want to take the guns away from that very community. Why? Because it means self-preservation. You can't have equity if you can't defend it. You can't have land if you can't defend it. You can't have real estate if you can't defend it, because all it takes is just somebody to come in and do a Tulsa and bomb you. You can't respond. What are you going to do? You're defenseless. They're the only ones with the power. They're the only ones with the authority. Now, I know in certain circles that's not a very popular opinion, because there's a lot of people in our country that do want to take away guns from the population. But we have to understand why it started, and that was to take guns away from you, and that was to make sure that you didn't have anything, because now you were a free individual to want. And the way they sold it was like, well, the black dude has guns, and they're the evil ones. They were just released. They're the ones that are going to be the criminals. They're the ones that are going to commit all the crime. And if they have guns, us white people are going to be in trouble. So we have to understand that even from a self-preservation standpoint, is they made this normal. It's normalized. Now we talk about this every election cycle. It's the guns fault. It's gun issues, and there's issues that we have to fix, of course, when it comes to gun violence. But we can't forget that what they have normalized is this idea that certain communities shouldn't defend themselves with firearms. Because it's very interesting that they never go after Castle Rock when they're talking about gun laws. They never really talk about Boulder when they're talking about gun laws. They're really just talking about Montbello. They're talking about Park Hill. They're talking about certain areas where systemically it's been an issue. So why doesn't it change? We've normalized oppression. It's normalized.
Stacey, anything?
I mean, just to kind of react to what you were just saying, it's so interesting to me because I've never heard that side of the gun conversation, to be totally honest. I grew up in Littleton. I was in 3rd grade when the Columbine High School shooting happened. My mother-in-law was a teacher there. So I think that that is what people choose to focus the rhetoric on, right? And the political conversations is like, oh, these school shootings. And but if the laws are really targeted at taking it away from the communities that aren't having mass shootings, right? The mass shooting didn't happen in Montbello High School. It happened in Littleton. So I just appreciate you bringing that concept up so that I'm more educated about that.
Beautiful. Hey, Mr. Hambright.
Repeat that question. You said even if we had a black president.
Yeah, so how do you address the fact that even with a black president, we still had the same issues during his tenure? Limited on time, boss.
Yeah, I'll be quick. You got to understand, when President Obama became president, he came in with a disadvantage. You know what I mean? He came with people in his party and cabinet that had racism in their heart. So, unless we all collectively working on the same page, it was impossible for him to get it passed. Case in point, when you had Mitch McConnell, the first racist statement, we'll just call it for what it is, came out of his mouth is, I want you to fail. How do you argue with that? So the minute I come in, any type laws I'm trying to get passed for any type red, black, brown community, which I personally think he did a phenomenal job in office, but he had those people like a Mitch McConnell and all the people and his cronies that was in this little cabinet, which I call the Confederate Party, I call the new Confederate Party. They just hiding behind their titles now because, as we just heard in that little clip in there, that it's something you can hide behind. How was he able to get anything passed if you already got people there that ain't even trying to listen to you in the first place? Think about it. So I can't sit there, and I have to disagree with you. I love you. I can't sit there and say, particularly Obama, because we're talking about African Americans, was a puppet. I truly believe he was trying to do the best that he could and work with what he had. But if you got those individuals who already got embedded in their heart that I ain't gonna listen to you. You like, what? I just, dang, I want to pass whatever the case was. Health care for all. Here's the bill. Mitch McConnell. No. Hey, I want to pass universal. No. I want to pass whatever. Dang, could I pass anything? No. Why? Because you black. Let's just call it for what it is.
Call a spade a spade. I get it.
It is what it is.
I get it. Well,
so no, he did the best he know how.
Yeah.
But now, I'll be very quick. Us knowing that now, what are we gonna do? We gotta change the action. We gotta change that course of action as individuals. All of us are leaders within our own self. I end on that note.
I'll add just one more thing
You go ahead.
before you shut me up.
Go ahead. I'm gonna ask you to talk again in a minute.
Hell
anyway.
yeah.
Thank you.
You know I can talk until this is done, and then I get all shy and I don't want to talk to anybody. I think that's kind of the other thing that we can stop doing is picking sides. We grow up like you're either red or you're blue, and then we forget to have a conversation with one another because you're already red or you're already blue. And I think one of the things that I'm for me personally, I've made it a mission to kind of stress is I really don't give two shits which gang you're related to or affiliated with, the red guys or the blue guys. Ultimately, if we're not helping each other, then we're relying on a system that we know is oppressive. Like, that's the funny thing is we're relying on a system that we know is oppressive, is going to create laws not to benefit you really, but to really oppress you. If you look at every law that's created, it's really not to benefit the individuals. We talk about regulation, and it benefits the top. It doesn't benefit the small businesses. It doesn't benefit my business in any way, shape, or form. When they passed these certain bills, my business didn't get any money, but multi-million-dollar companies got even more millions in all this stuff. So it doesn't really matter whose side you're in. It's an oppressive system that's not there to benefit anyone. We have to get to the point where it's just like, I don't give a shit what side you're on. What are we going to do for each other to help each other out and make sure that we're successful? Because ultimately, if you're successful, then I'm successful by default. Right. If Jay is successful, then I get to be on a panel and talk some shit and feel special. And if I'm successful, Jay has a platform as well. It's the only way it's going to work. Not picking the red or the blue side, because I've never been in a position where the blue guys or the red guys gave me anything of value at all.
Yeah, I think politics it's unique in a sense where it's like professional gangbanging. So one thing I'd like to touch on before moving forward is I'd like to shout out Iconic Medical Group. Thank you all for donating our face shields, which we refused to use because I don't believe you'd be able to hear us through the plastic. However, they're very durable. Please feel free to suggest to your family physician and to your dentist, as well as to any professional that you work with. Iconic Medical Group for the face shields. Thank you for that. To chime back in on a point to kind of clarify what I referenced earlier about Obama being a puppet, it was more so to that end about Mitch McConnell, where he's in a position and he's at the front end of that. It's similar like to our athletes, right? So we think so much of our athletes, but at the end of the day, they're cashing a check that someone else wrote. So Obama wasn't in there writing checks. He was simply distributing the resources that were afforded to him to provide. I think he was an incredible president. I love the fact that he was even elected, much less elected twice. But I still think that his power was limited because the people behind the scenes were still the people behind the scenes. A few more questions I'd like to tap on from...
Fact.
Huh?
Fact.
Yeah, big facts. What do you think of the optics of Trump going to Tulsa Juneteenth campaign rally? Any thoughts?
I actually didn't hear about that one.
Yeah, that's next Friday, right?
Yep.
June 19th, he's doing a rally in Tulsa.
Really?
So I want to be limited again. I know we got time constraints, but that I am going to say nothing. I'm not going to say nothing, but I'd love if any of you have anything to say.
I think for me is we got to stop caring about that type of shit. Like for me anyways, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's just we're so focused on what the orange dude is doing, and we don't focus on what the real issues are. These are all just distractions. Even in business, me as a businessman, I have to focus on what I got to do. And any YouTube video that I watch is just a distraction from what I really need to focus on. So him going to Tulsa, we already know what it is. It's an opportunity for him to take pictures and be like, I like black people. And that's really about it. I don't know how genuine he is. I don't know the guy personally. I feel that most politicians are fake as shit. I don't give a shit which side they're on. They're just fake. So I think it's just a distraction, though. I don't think it benefits any of us to give energy to something that's not going to benefit us in any way, shape, or form if we give energy to it.
That's true. Your thoughts, Stacey?
Well, I mean, it makes me angry. I think it's a terrible decision. And I think that you're right, that paying attention to it and talking about it takes away from the real issues. I do think that the people that vote for him should pay attention to it and maybe reconsider. Yeah. I also think that it takes away from the local conversation. I think and it ties into the first question about how come Barack Obama wasn't able to create deep systemic change in 8 years. Is that a lot of change in legislation happens on a local level. We have a local election coming up on June 30th. I think a lot of people don't even know that, right? But we know where Trump's having his next rally. So the way that our government is created is to have power at the local level. So I think hopefully we can use it as an opportunity to shift more towards focusing on local conversations and maybe stop paying attention to his little TV show that he's having.
Twitter. Yeah. All his priorities. Mr. Hammer?
Well, now that you brought it up, just pretty much what Stacey said. Like, I didn't know about it because I literally done quit watching the news. I mean, I done pretty much zoned out. I limit my schedule to only an hour a day with the news. I watch 30 minutes. I get up at 4 in the morning. I pray. I meditate. I go to my run and jog at 5:30. I'm in the shower somewhere around 6-ish. I watch maybe an hour of local news just so I know, most so for the weather. Then I watch 30 minutes of world news. After that, I'm done. I don't watch no more news. So, yeah, we just got to quit giving ear to, just put it plainly, BS. You know what I mean? And focus on the real options. She just touched on some of them. We got local elections coming up here. Because of this movement that's going on now, we need to be involved in that stuff. I only can speak to government because I was part of the government. I understand the value of having government. You know what I mean? Whether you agree or disagree or what have you, government is still valuable in our society because it keeps a certain level of order. Now, whether how extreme you want it or whatever, I still like to know when I get on that plane, I have a government system in place to protect that those pilots are trained, that plane is safe, and I know it's not going to crash. You know what I'm saying? So I respect government, yes, to a sense. Do I want them necessarily controlling my personal life? No. So with that said, yeah, let's just quit giving attention to them. Now, if you're going to vote for them, God bless you. Do what you want. But I'm not giving ear to anything because I have my own life to worry about and my own priorities to deal with and my own business to grow. And in turn, when I can grow myself, I can be a more asset to my community and the people I'm around.
Dope. From a viewer on that same question, she chimed in from Laura stating that the Tulsa rally is inconceivable, but she says that it reinforces that Trump is clearly a KKK member and terrorist number one. So thank you for your truth, Laura.
Can I say something to that?
Yeah.
Not defending Trump, but I think this is what we have to understand. And it's been said before, I'm not the first one to say this, but if you're worried about Trump having this much power and this much influence, you got to understand that when the shit flips, every president is going to have that same amount of power. So if your next guy you give the guy you do like, because that's what happens is like, oh, my guy's in office, so let's give him all the power. You got to understand that same power is still going to be there when the guy you hate is in office or the lady that you hate. And I think this is this revolving door of just like, oh, my person is amazing, and whatever my person does is okay and it's wonderful. And now we're seeing that reflection is because I'm starting to feel the crowd now. When Obama was in office, just like, you fucking do whatever you want, like by all means, like, we'll pave the road for you. And now that the orange guy's in, now everybody's all like, oh no, fuck that. Like, no, you were okay with executive orders. You were okay with all of that stuff when your guy was in. Now you got to understand, it's just like, it's the two-party system that's just going to take you from both angles and is going to Eiffel Tower you, and it's just the way it goes. It's just, you got to understand that the power you're giving to someone that next person is going to have that power. That's the problem with all of this stuff. And giving these people blind power to do whatever the hell they want is, so on the KKK thing is just, is this the people you want protecting you then? Is this the people that you want to be in charge of your enforcement? Is this the people, if the guy at the top is a KKK member, is this the person, and is his government the one you want in charge of everything? And when this guy's gone, the people who do like the orange guy, you got to understand the next time, the next go around, it's going to be someone you hate. In my opinion, they're the same shit at this point. But you just got to realize it. Like it just, you're voting for your oppression. You're voting for that stuff. If they have that much power,
Right.
if they say that they are what you say they are.
Right. To that end, I think because something I didn't reference in my introduction is that I was born and raised in Chicago, and my adolescent years were spent between the south side of Chicago, Illinois, where all my family is from the low end, from Cabrini Green and Ida B. Wells and the Ickies, Stateway, out west, as far south as Argyle Gardens, where I went to school, and I attended Carver Military Academy. And my time was split between Chicago and Long Beach, California, and Inglewood, California. So something I'd like, again, I just want to reiterate, no, I'm going to just say this instead. So something else that was posed was, how do you uneducate the brain of people because it's so deep in their unconscious or even in their subconscious? And something else I wanted to reference as I'm letting the panelists consider that is that Mr. Dick Gregory, bless him, referenced insurance for cops. And so I kind of want to just throw all of this in here together because, again, I'm trying to be cognizant of the time that we have available to us. In that instance, a suggestion of Mr. Gregory's was the first time a cop violates the term, they can't be employed any longer. And a reference was that we can change the behavior by not making cops like blacks or like browns, but encourage them to think of and value the people that they do like, i.e. their wives and their children. A reference was that cops should have their children allowed to go to school either for free or at a 50% discount. And my question to you all is, what are your thoughts on that? Is that a legislation that should be passed? And as you're answering that, really kind of giving you loaded questions. I'm giving you a lot to think about because I just want you to get it all out. Edgar, in your space of 2A in black communities and defensive black communities and how they're populated and then how their education and how their awareness works, why do you see or why do you believe that they choose or choose not to exercise those rights? Stacey, I'd like your thoughts on how cases could prospectively be revisited where prejudice of either the judge, the jury, or the prosecution is explored, or how statutes and laws making felons and felonies make life difficult after their release and their reentry, and how can a system designed to harm blacks be redesigned? And for Mr. Hambright, from a real estate perspective and wealth and the accumulation of wealth, intergenerational wealth, how has gerrymandering and redlining created this space where now not only are black people not fiscally educated on just the basics, but they're simply not empowered? So I just wanted you all to mull that over for a moment because I asked you a lot and put a lot out there. Shout out to our sponsors. Shout out to Dazzle. Thank you, Don Rosa, for the time.
Oh, this place is nice.
Super dope, isn't it?
Yeah.
So with all of that, from the education of things being in the depth of the brain, now that I've kind of targeted your individual specialties, real estate, the 2A community, everything associated with our justice system, I'd love to just get your thoughts.
In that order?
Nah.
So in the 2A space, I see this with minorities is because we have been told by our protectors that guns are bad. We shouldn't have guns. We shouldn't keep them in our house. We shouldn't do anything. And not realizing, like, we never ask why. Like, why are they bad? Like, we see Columbine. Shit needs to be done about that stuff. But we can't say everybody's at fault for this. Right. Clearly, there's an issue. And at the same time, when something like that, a mass shooting happens, the people who own guns are like, oh, it's a mental health issue. So we just grab balls and like, no, it's your problem. No, it's your problem. And we never really address what the real issues are.
I don't want to interrupt, but shout out to Walk the Talk America.
Walk the Talk America,
Shout out
yeah,
to
absolutely.
Walk the
That's a
Talk
great
America.
organization, Walk the Talk America, mental health organization. Mike Sedini is an amazing individual, doing a lot of great work with mental health and guns, just in general. So this idea that systemically, again, if you trace back the first gun laws, they were racist laws. They were to prevent you from having a gun. Hating Mexicans is a relatively new thing in the U.S. where we're like, it wasn't really for us. We were kind of included in all of that stuff, but it really didn't start with Mexicans. It was to prevent black people who were newly freed, prevent them from owning guns. So if we understand that, that's what's been taught to us, like, oh, let's just not have guns. And they sacrificed a few things to just make sure that a certain community didn't own these guns. So we have to understand the importance. You don't have to be a gun enthusiast. I'm not a gun enthusiast. Like, if you talk to me about the newest, the freshest gun, like, it's just, for me, it's a gun. It's got a trigger on it, and it's going to keep me alive, hopefully, and it's going to allow me to protect what I hold dear to me, and that's my family. Disregard TVs and shit like that. That's not why I carry a gun. It's to defend my life and the people around me. If once you start understanding that, that's how you defend your community. You use it as a freedom tool. This is what makes me free. In 1776, we learned this we learn about this in school. Regardless of where you're at politically, is the only way we preserve that freedom from, at that point, an oppressive government, which is, we can get into this complex conversation about the oppressed, fighting the oppressed to oppress more people. It was with guns. That's what preserved their freedom. Harriet Tubman, like she was strapped all the time. Like she had rifles, she had guns. Why? Because she knew if shit hit the fan, she was gonna have to pew pew. So she was ready. She was ready. Martin Luther King was ready. Like all of these historical figures owned firearms, and yet you have certain politicians that go into these communities, the Mexican communities and the black communities. It's like, well, guns are bad. You should just give them up and let the mean orange guy keep the guns because he's cool to have guns and everybody else is cool to have guns, but you guys shouldn't have guns. And I think we got to understand that for what it is just we have to understand, we in the gun community need to understand that there is an issue with gun violence, and we have to work towards solving that problem collectively. But at the same time, we need to understand why firearms ownership is so important. You could do both. Like, it's fucking mind-boggling, mind-blowing, but you could do both. Like, you can still solve the gun violence issue. You can still work towards that and still like guns. Like you could do both all at the same time. And a big part of it is just understanding why gun ownership is so important. It's that understanding part. Even if you don't go full blown with gun ownership, is understanding why. Right. We don't have to agree as long as we understand each other. I think that's the important thing.
Agreed. All gun control is racist.
All gun control is racist, yep.
Stacey?
So I heard, too, before we got into the specific questions for each of us, a larger question of what do you do because it's so deeply ingrained, and how do we actually start to change it? And it's, so I come from a clinical background. I was a mental health and substance abuse therapist, and we often use the analogy that shame can't survive in the light. Shame thrives when we bury it down and when we shroud it in darkness. And the same thing happens with racism. If we keep it pushed down and we don't talk about it, it grows and it changes and it becomes more ingrained in us. But if we open it up and allow some light in, we might have some opportunities for change. Like it happened just now. I was talking about equity and it came off as like white saviorism, right? And fuck, I don't know that, right? I watch Freedom Writers and I see how the movie ends with the lady rapping with her hat backwards and whatever. And like that narrative is something that I don't ever want to be part of. And I don't want to come off as someone that thinks that Black and brown communities need saving. But if I don't ever have the conversation, I might not get the feedback of how things sound. So being vulnerable and letting things have light, so that we can talk about them, I think is how we actually start to change this deep-rooted stuff that happens. And for the criminal justice system, there's a loophole written into the 13th Amendment, right? We freed slaves, and in the same breath, we made it legal to incarcerate people because they have a criminal record.
And then create laws that would incriminate, that would put them.
Exactly. Create laws that would incriminate them so that people could go right back to having slaves. So that issue from day one has been ingrained deeper and deeper and deeper into our criminal justice system, to a point now where the sentencing laws for crack cocaine, which is historically affiliated with black communities, and powder cocaine, which is historically affiliated with white communities, have very different sentencing laws. 5 grams of crack cocaine and 500 grams of powder cocaine carry the same sentence. That is racist. That is why we have 50% of our incarcerated community is black Americans. And we have to change those laws because they don't deserve to be there. Yeah.
Love that. In the space of, and Mr. Hambright will be right back. Oh, here he is. I'll give him a moment because I referenced gerrymandering and I referenced redlining, and for those that aren't aware or educated, if you wouldn't mind giving them a brief understanding of what those things are, and then just speak to that space of, again, the whole focal point of this entire dialogue is that equality is lip service and it's bullshit and it's glossing over facts, and so we're here to talk about equity. And so in that space, what are your thoughts in that real estate spectrum, but specific to redlining and gerrymandering? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, so I can speak very clear to that. Goes back to 2008 in Detroit. Like I said, you do the history of where I come from, we've been, everything the world is going through, we've already been there. Right. You know what I mean? You gotta understand, Detroit is a blue-collar state. 2008, you know, the mortgage meltdown, that sector of the country got hit probably the hardest out of anywhere in the country. Detroit, Chicago, Philly, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, because those are industrial states. So redlining, gerrymandering, all that is very big, pretty much in a city like Detroit. Where car insurance, yes, property value is cheap. The homes over here at 6 in Monaco reminds you of Detroit. I feel like I'm at home when I drive through that area. But those homes are what, over $1 million. Detroit, you can get those half the price, not even close. Probably like $200,000 or whatever, maybe $50,000 depending on where you're at. But the difference when you're in those sections is, unlike suburbs, this is where the redlining comes in at. Your car insurance, your home insurance are extremely high. So you'll have a nice house and everything, a decent on a home and everything, but you're gonna pay 5-6% more than the person in the suburbs. So that is a problem. That's a huge problem. Your car insurance probably be the same as almost a mortgage payment. You know, like $600 for whatever car you to drive. It's extremely high. So that is a serious issue. Particularly here in Denver, we can go to the affordable housing. That's an extreme issue because ain't nothing affordable here. Being in the real estate market, if you I just say the average home price in Denver is what, $500,000. You know what I mean? That's just in Denver. Aurora is the high $400,000. Between $350,000 and above, you at the low end spectrum of housing, you in the rat race. Anything less than $350,000 to $200,000, you pretty much in condos and townhomes. Anything less than the $200,000, you out of market. So there's your gerrymandering. Why did it get that way? Period. It goes back to, almost a game of Monopoly. Whoever has the goal makes the rules. Unfortunately, if you ain't got goal, then you ain't the one that can make the rules. Bottom line.
Right.
The new language of money now is green. How we're going to change that? If we talk about on a political side, one aspect, you got to get involved. Bottom line, to have those policies constructed to where you want it. It ain't going to happen if you're not in the boardroom. So you got to get involved in your local government, like you mentioned before. Your local government is really where all the main issues, like redlining, gerrymandering, is where it's not really on the federal level, it's your local level where all these small issues that affect your community is going to take place. So you got to be on the boards. All the decisions are made in the boardroom, and if you're not there and a part of that, it's going to be those individuals that don't look like you making decisions on your behalf. Case in point, that's why we got the issue. I just stick with Denver now, because I belong to the National Association of Real Estate Board, and our organization is trying to fight redlining and affordable housing for all people, pretty much I just stick with Denver, Colorado area. Our goal is to get at least 2 million people into home ownership. But yes, you do have a problem. You have affordable housing issues. So those policies are going to have to be changed, and the only way they're going to be changed is us as the community and public to start going to those elections, even the ones that are not made public, to get involved to fight gerrymandering, redlining. That's the only way that's going to change. Period, point blank in the discussion. There's no simple way to explain that. Now, as it pertains to money and equality, everybody have this thing about gentrification. I mean, y'all probably going to hate me for this, but gentrification is, bottom line, whoever has the goal. Because at the end of the day, the banks don't care about who got. They ain't looking at the color of your skin. If you
Got an 800.
Yeah, you got an 800, you got whatever. If you got the money. Why is that? Why is that? It's because we don't have the resources to educate our community and people on literacy, or the language, I would say. John Hope Bryan is got a book out called, I can't even think of the name now. Oh, it's called The Memo. It talks every bit about the income inequality. It talks about redlining. It talks about gentrification, etc. How we were left out. It's called The Memo by John Hope Bryan. And it talks about all these issues that we're talking about. And it goes back to the educational background. Nobody taught us any of that, so therefore we have this problem. So you can't get mad if, I don't care who it is, Chinese, Jewish people, whoever, Indian, Italian, Mexican, black, I don't care who it is. If they see that piece of land across the street that they want to sell, but they got the income, the credit, and everything, and all the resources they did because they educated themselves, you can't sit there and be mad at that. You can't sit there and say, and that's the biggest problem in Detroit. They still got this mindset of the white people or these people or the Middle Eastern, because all the corner stores in that region is controlled by Middle Eastern people. You know what I mean? Liquor stores controlled by Middle Eastern people. Oh, they taking our land. Okay. But they got the money, they got the credit, they got the capital, they work within their community. They have the favor of the banking industry. Why is that? Why don't we have that? You get what I'm saying? It all goes back to one factor. You got to educate yourself. You got to educate your community. That's the only way, in my opinion, I see that being eliminated. Because if you don't educate yourself and your community, let's just start with yourself, because everything starts with yourself. On the new language of money, which the new language of money now is green, period. It's green. And once you have that, then you can go for all the other laws that surround that. The redlining, which is that's a political thing. You know what I mean? But if you ain't got that, if you don't have that equity because you never educated yourself on the language of money, then we're going to be sitting back here. I'm 46 now. 20 years from now, nothing's changed, and we still sitting up here preaching the same thing, which I'm tired of. Like I said, I'm tired of "we shall overcome someday." Somebody need to change. Well, somebody change the song. Just come up with a new song. Come up with a new anthem. I'm tired of "we shall overcome."
Oh, Negro spirituals.
Yeah, I'm tired. I ain't saying get rid of it because it's part of history, and it's an awesome song for maybe that time during the 60s. But we need something new now. We have overcame. We're going to seek, we're going to conquer, we're going to overtake. But we're going to do it legally, we're going to do ethically, and we're going to do it in the right spirit. And we're going to do it in the spirit of love. That's all I'll say.
Can I speak to the legally, though, just really quick, just to stir the mud? Slavery was legal. So if we talk about doing stuff legally, we at times get to the point where it's just we're working within the oppression, and it's just we can't move beyond because we're asking people to be lawful about something. Because we have to understand that sometimes breaking the law doesn't mean doing something really evil. Sometimes it means doing the right thing, actually, as opposed to doing something realistically criminal. For me, anyways, no victim, no crime. And I think that's where we have to be careful when we talk about working within the law, is a lot of fucked up shit was legal. A lot of fucked up shit was legal. And still is.
Yeah.
Well, who put it there? That's the question. Who put it there?
Yeah.
Okay, we already know about the past. You had those racist individuals, call it for what it is, who controlled everything, who oppressed a group of people, you know what I mean? And who imposed their bias, racist, prejudice, whatever you want to call it, ideology on a community or a group of people, and it got passed. Case in point, Donald Trump, the orange person you just said.
Oompa Loompa.
You know what I mean? Should have been impeached. All the evidence there. The only person I got to give credit for that stood out the crowd was Mitt Romney. Went against this whole crowd. But all them people in that little cabinet knew he should have been in, but the evidence was clear. But why didn't you do it? Yeah, see, now we're dealing with that issue of the heart. Now we're dealing with that issue of racism. You get what I'm saying?
I think we're dealing
now
with the issue of equity.
All of that.
Money's
you know
still
what I
in
mean?
it.
No, we don't want him. We're going to not impeach him for whatever reason, for whatever political reason it is. So that's what we're fighting against, is my point. That's what I'm fighting against. That's what we're fighting against. We still need laws because we still got to keep some form of order. We can't just have complete chaos on everything. When I'm sitting in a restaurant like this, I like to know the food is safe, is been by the food and whoever laws that govern that. I like to know that it's clean, and when I'm eating it, I'm not going to get sick. So we do need some form of government. No, I don't want them in my personal life, per se, but I'm not just going to cast them out totally because it's still necessary.
To that point, I agree, sort of. And I know contact tracing is real, so don't knock on my door. I'm going to get to a quote from Bertolt Brecht, and then I'll have some closing statements because we're super over time. But we haven't been kicked off the stage, and I don't even think Don is here, so he can't kick me out anyway. The worst illiterate is the political illiterate. He hears nothing, sees nothing, takes no part in political life. He doesn't seem to know that the cost of living, the price of beans, of flour, of rent, of medicines, all depend on political decisions. He even prides himself on his political ignorance, sticks out his chest, and says he hates politics. He doesn't know the imbecile, that from his political non-participation comes the prostitute, the abandoned child, the robber, and worst of all, corrupt officials, the lackeys of exploitive multinational corporations. Brilliant quote. So we'll move into closing remarks. Again, I want to reiterate my appreciation of all of you joining me today. I want to thank Dazzle, team here, Don, Mr. Fitz, Mark, everyone here. I want to thank friends and family that have showed up. I want to thank everyone that took the time to tune in and join us virtually. And any closing remarks, any statements, anything on your heart or on your mind, feel free to let it rip.
That last quote was for me, wasn't it, fucker?
Was it? Yeah.
I felt personally attacked.
You should have.
I just appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, same. Thanks for having me. This was great.
Yeah, I feel very honored at the last moment, that you invited me, and I just want to say I want to see this discussion to continue on. We can go deep. This rabbit hole can go deep, and I like the fact that we are opening this up and not turning a deaf ear on it. And I just want us to continue to stay engaged on topics like this, because it's only going to go away unless we're talking about it. If we keep turning a blind shoulder to it, then it's going to go back to the same status quo again. So I'm honored to be here. I appreciate being here. And I thank you all for showing up and just opening your hearts up to have this dialogue discussion and continue to have this discussion with your family as well.
Dopeness, dopeness. Again, I'm your moderator, Jay Clark. Friends and family know me as Jay Hood. My mama named me Jaron Clark. And this is Dazzle Presents. So thank you for joining us and have an extremely beautiful and wonderful Thursday.